It's amazing that summer is already something that we are looking towards, that it's almost here, that school is almost out. The year has moved quite quickly, and yet time seems to drag on, doesn't it? It seems like decades ago that COVID-19 began, and yet, here we are, and time seems to be flying by as well. So it's this weird dynamic. We began this year with a desire to refocus upon our faith, because with everything that's been going on, we needed time to kind of refocus on what's important. We haven't really dealt with the doctrine so much as the heart, what we're called to do. We've looked at the importance of reading our Bible in our faith journey. We've looked at the importance of prayer and communion and fellowship. We've looked at how God has lovingly sought us and saved us. We've looked at what we believe, the fact that we believe that there is a God, that Jesus is a real person, that we can trust the Bible. We've looked at the fact that God has given us a standard of morality and calls us to uphold justice, and importantly, how we are saved. And as we look at all these things, as we consider all these things that we have been looking at, when it comes to refocusing upon our faith, I think we can best sum up all of this in one passage. In Acts chapter 2. If you have your Bibles, turn over there. Luke wrote it. Acts chapter 2, starting in verse 42. He says, "Therefore devote yourselves to the apostles' teaching, to the fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. It all came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. And all who believed were together, and they had all things in common." Luke describes the early church as devoted. They were devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, to fellowship, to the breaking of bread, and to prayer. And really what we've been looking at over the first part of this year has been that devotion, what that devotion should look like. But there's one that I want to highlight once again this morning. That is the devotion to fellowship, the importance of fellowship. Fellowship is a key aspect of the church. It's a key aspect of who we are. When we think of the church, we often think of things that go along with fellowship, don't we? A firm handshake, a warm hug, a nice, kind greeting, a conversation that makes us feel at home, a place where we can unwind and find comfort, especially in difficult times. Right? That's what the church is supposed to be. That's who we are. The church is a gathering together to sing and to fellowship, a wonderful place where you come for home-cooked meals and you're never disappointed. Right? That's what the church is. When you think about what the church is, that's what you think about. And this fellowship is a key aspect of who we are as a church. And over the past several years, it's this aspect of fellowship that has been so challenging. It's this element of fellowship that's been so challenging because in order to try to keep each other safe, we've had to find distance. We've had to pull away and keep each other at arm's distance despite the desire to be together because we wanted to keep one another safe. It's a difficult place to be in, right? In many ways, the pandemic is everything the church is not, right? Because this is a place where we come together. This is a place where we fellowship, where we're in close proximity, where we love one another and we greet one another warmly. That's who we are. That's what we are. So it's been a challenging season. The Bible is very clear about the importance of fellowship. It's very clear about the importance of being together. And as wonderful as the technology has been that has tried to keep us connected during these times, we all know that none of the technology really completely fits the bill. No YouTube video, as well produced as it could be, as good as the audio quality might be, is going to make up for an in-person gathering. No Zoom meeting is going to make up for the conversations that happened before and after, the catching up, the drinking of coffee together. Nothing makes up for that. Technology is a great blessing. It's gotten us through these several years, but it doesn't replace the in-person. And yet, we know that that's not always possible. Right? There are those who cannot be present or don't feel that they can be present yet or aren't comfortable yet with a large crowd. So we have a complex situation, and we've definitely had a complex situation over the last couple of years. Let's look over at Galatians chapter 6 as we really kind of wrap our mind around the importance of fellowship. In Galatians chapter 6, starting in verse 1, here's what Paul says. Brothers, if anyone is caught in transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. Keep watch over yourself, lest you too be tempted. Bear one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. But if anyone thinks he is something when he is nothing, he deceives himself. But let each one test his own work, and when he has reason to boast will be in himself alone, and not in his neighbor, for each will have to bear his own load. Paul explains very clearly why it's so important that we be together. Something happens when we rub shoulders with one another on a Sunday morning. When we have those interactions over the course of several weeks and several months and several years where we get a baseline of what a good week looks like for you. So that when you come in and you're trying to put on that mask and you're trying to put on that happy face and you're walking through the halls and we notice that something is off, we're able to kind of to pry a little bit and say, are you okay? I mean it. Are you doing all right this week? What's going on? Because we need that fellowship. We need that connection. And it really only happens in the context of in person, together on a regular basis. And quite frankly, just a Sunday morning isn't enough. That is bare bones minimum when it comes to the concept of fellowship. It should be something that is continual throughout the week. Fellowship, togetherness, facilitates this kind of bearing each other's burdens. It facilitates the importance of being together. But that's not always possible, is it? There are some who are not able to be present. We look around this room this morning, and there are those faces that we know are missing. This morning, I want to be honest, blunt. Let me tell you where I'm at, where my family is at, right? My wife has several genetic conditions. Chances are my daughters also have those genetic conditions, and we won't know the full grasp of that for many, many years. On a daily basis, for many years, my wife has dealt with health problems that very much resemble COVID-19 and long COVID. She's been dealing with an infection for several months now that she can't quite shake. Gets a little bit better, gets a little bit worse. We eagerly desire to be here, to rub shoulders, to be involved. And yet, because of her condition, the risk of getting COVID is not just one of will I survive, but it's will the quality of life that is already difficult become even harder. So we've been cautious. You watch me around the building, I'm often wearing a mask, right? Because we're being cautious. And while the rest of the world goes back to living life as normal, and while I know many of you have been over the pandemic since before it began, and I get it, not everyone's there. We have a lot of people who join us online. So as we talk about this issue of the importance of fellowship, we have to understand the complexity of the situation. I'm not asking you to agree with my position or my view of this virus. I'm asking you to be aware, as I am aware, of the variety of perspectives in our community as a whole, as a nation, and the complexity of being here. Since the second week of the pandemic, I have gotten emails talking about the post-pandemic church. Let that sink in. The second week of the pandemic, over 2 years ago, people were writing books about the post-pandemic church and getting people back into the pews. Right? This is a complex situation, and we have been chomping at the bit to get back to normal. We all want to be back to normal. YouTube is great, and it keeps us connected. But we have to understand the complexity of the situation. So as we think about this concept of being in fellowship, I want us to take us to another passage. And with an understanding of the complexity of the situation that lies before us in dealing with this issue of being together, I want us to look over at Luke 15. Several parables are given here in Luke 15, and we're going to be looking at what is often called the parable of the prodigal son. I believe that's wrongly named. I don't think it's about the son. I think it's about the father. And that's what we're going to be looking at this morning. We don't have time to go over all of this, but a little bit of background. He gives two other parables as he leads up to this final parable. It's 3 in 1. All three have the same meaning. We see the value of lost things, the value of seeking after them, and it begins with 1 out of 100 sheep, 1%, and the value of that one lost sheep. Then he moves on to the 1 of 10 coins that are lost, 10%. And finally we get to 1 of 2 sons that are lost, 50%. And in the end, actually, if you look at it, both sons are lost. And we only know of half that are restored. So with an understanding of the complexity of the situation that we find ourselves in and an understanding of the background, let's get into the text here. In Luke chapter 15, starting in verse 11, we read, "And he said, there was a man who had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me my share of the property that is coming to me.' And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all that he had, and he took a journey into a far country, and there he squandered his property in reckless living." Like we've been doing this whole year, we're going to be looking at important principles. A little bit of background, though I don't want to focus on this heavily. The son greatly insults his father. Basically, "I wish you were dead. You're worth nothing to me other than the property that it is eventually coming to me. Let's save ourselves both a headache. You don't have to die. Just give me my money." And in doing so, he insults the father, he insults the family, he insults his community and his nation and his religion, and he leaves. And he makes a horrible decision because he squanders everything that he has in leaving and insulting his community, and he goes. But that's really just the background, because the focus is upon the father and upon the father's mindset, because surprisingly, the father gives him everything he asked for without raising question. There's no discussion here about the father raising objection to his son's request, though it must have hurt him deeply. But we see the father's mindset if we jump down into verse 20 and following. "And he arose and he came to his father. But while he was still a long ways off, his father saw him and felt compassion. And he ran and he embraced him and he kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to the servant, 'Bring quickly the best robe and put it upon him, and put the ring upon his hand, the shoes upon his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. This son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and he is found.' And they began to celebrate." The father, from the day that the son left, was looking for his return. He always had an eye on the horizon, always looking. A little bit of joy would come in his heart when he would see someone walking down the road, and then it's not him. But one day, weeks, months, maybe even years later, the father, still with his eye on the horizon, sees someone coming, and he looks again, and he says, "That's my boy." And he doesn't wait for him to get to him. He doesn't wait to see how he grovels or how he apologizes. He runs to him. He embraces him with great joy. And it's very clear that the father is not listening to the son at all. Because as he greets him, as he embraces him, as he kisses him, He turns to his servants who are following behind, surprised at his actions, and says, "Bring the robe, bring the ring, bring the shoes, bring the fattened calf. We're having a party. This son of mine was dead, and he's alive. He was lost, and now he's found." As we look at the son's mindset here, I think it's very clear that this lost son planned to manipulate his father. He knew he couldn't probably become a son again, so he just needed to get a little bit better position. And he planned to apologize just enough in order to maybe become a hired hand in the household. But I believe the father's reaction here, his compassion, his warm greeting, his loving greeting him back, brought the son to complete repentance, brought him back into the family. He cared for his needs. He welcomed him back warmly. This is what he was longing for, his son to come home, and he was. As we think about this in the context of a parable, the father, this loving father, is a stand-in for God. He represents God and his loving compassion upon us, his desire to see us restored to him. The fact that he forgave all these misdeeds, these insults to himself and to his community and to his family. He forgave those. He forgave the breaking of morals that were embedded into him and instilled into him from a young age. The father looked over all of that in order to restore his son back, lovingly greeting him and welcoming him back. So we see a principle of how we ought to be like the Father in greeting others back, warmly welcoming them back, without question, without a weary eye, but warmly welcoming them back. Those who are not here this morning, we miss greatly. We miss them greatly. We long for the day when we see them upon the horizon and when they're able to come back and be with us once more. Let me begin or end this morning by addressing those who aren't here, who are joining us online. We understand that there are concerns about COVID. We understand that these are difficult times and difficult decisions, and we want you to know that we trust you. We trust your decision-making, your judgment in figuring out when you are comfortable being in a large gathering once more. We long for that day. We look forward to that day, and we wait patiently for that day when we can once again be physically present, because we know how valuable this is. And we want to remind you of the value of being physically present. But we know that it may take some time yet. We understand that and we respect that. But we also don't want to be so naive as to believe that all people, though I believe it is the majority of people, are in that boat. I know that there are some who have fallen into a set of bad habits, right? Who have become comfortable with church at home. I don't think that's the majority of people. I think that's a minority of people, but there are some. And we want to encourage you to break out of that mold and understand the value of being with us, the value of being here, the spiritual importance of having a body of people around you on a regular basis who can encourage you, who can call you to righteousness. If the son who went off and spent his wealth in reckless living and abandonment of all the principles he was established was welcomed back warmly, know that we will welcome you back simply if you've fallen in to some bad habits, to complacency. And we long for the day when you come home, and we're going to seek to not question your motives or where you've been, but simply welcome you back with open arms. But this lesson also applies to those who have completely fallen into sin. Maybe the pandemic was a catalyst for that, but they fell into sin. They've fallen into a lifestyle that is not becoming of a Christian, and they look at their life now compared to what it was maybe 2 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, and they look at themselves and they say, you know what, I can't darken the door of a church. Look at who I've become. If I wanted to come into this facility again, I would have to come up with some pretext. I'd have to come up with some sort of an apology that maybe could compensate for all the wrongs that I've done. But look at the story of the prodigal son. If you truly are a prodigal, the prodigal was welcomed back warmly. And that warm welcome back brought him to true repentance. So whether you find yourself in a position where you're staying away because you're not yet comfortable with large crowds, know that we're patiently waiting for you. We're not calling you a prodigal son, but we're saying we long for the day when you're able to be back with us. We long for that day, desperately. Maybe you've fallen into those bad habits. Once again, we're not calling you a prodigal son. We're saying you've simply fallen into some bad habits. Come home. We long to see you. We miss you. And if you do feel like you're that prodigal son who has fallen into sin, know that there is forgiveness. That we long to welcome you back with open arms. We long for that day. We look forward to that day. While we're here, there's one more subgroup, I guess, to discuss who might be joining us online. And that would be those who feel forgotten. That over the course of the last couple of years haven't been reached out to or haven't been reached out to often. They feel forgotten. They feel overlooked. I don't know if there's anybody who that has happened to here. I believe our elders have sought to make contact with everybody, to keep in contact with everyone, to know where everyone is at. But if you've fallen through the cracks, or maybe your home church that you used to attend and you've been watching with us has failed to reach out to you, has failed to stay in contact with you, and you feel abandoned, overlooked, let us say we're sorry for that. That our desire to trust you to make the right decision during this difficult time, that we've made mistakes, and we long to see you home as well. And allow us, as we make contact with people over the next couple of months, as we seek to bring you home, let us know those hurts, and let us apologize for those mistakes. But I haven't forgotten those who are present here this morning. I know that many who are here this morning have long been over the pandemic, and the talk of it continuing on, and those who are at home maybe even seems a little bit silly. A dredging up of history that better left in the past. I want to encourage you to have compassion like the Father did. Not to question those decisions and the politics of it all and the science of it all, but to simply welcome them home. To look to the Father as an example who warmly and lovingly welcomes home those who come back. Let us seek to remove even a hint of sarcasm in our voice. I don't think we often mean it this way. At least I don't believe we mean it this way, but when we see someone we haven't seen in a while, we say, "Oh, hey, stranger. Welcome, guest." Adds a little bit of sting to an already maybe uncomfortable reunion. Let us seek to simply be joyful. Let us seek to simply be loving. We've missed you. What's going on in your life? Where have you been? Catch me up on all the things that have happened over the last couple of years. How are you handling things? We need to be that loving Father who joyfully celebrates the homecoming of those who come home, because we understand the value that they have. We understand the difficulties that they've been through, and we seek to have that compassion and to be kind. I know this to be a loving church. I know this to be a greeting church. I often don't get to greet our guests because you guys are doing it. Right? That's who I know you to be. You're a loving church. But I want to encourage us to be welcoming of those who come home. And I want to say to those who are not yet home, who have had to stay away, who find themselves in a season of wandering in the desert, as it were, that we long for the day when you come back. We look forward to that day. We miss you. We want to support you in these challenging times. And we look forward to the day when once again we're all together again, praising God, lifting our voices together, able to bear one another's burdens in person, in fellowship, and in harmony. Let's sing.